Good evening, folks, and welcome to another episode of Beer Rating with Sean Connors. As you can see, the beer for this episode is Sapporo Premium Beer. Let me pour this up. Nice, almost like a straw color. Pretty clear, nice head. Not a bad aroma. And a little bit about this beer before I give it a taste. It's a lager, it's rated at 5% alcohol. It's a Japanese beer, it's actually the oldest beer brand in Japan since about 1876. However, in 2006, they actually bought out Sleeman's in Canada. So now this Sapporo beer that you actually get in Canada, and I believe the United States as well, is actually brewed in North America by Sleeman's. You see that a lot of international brands, rather than importing their beer, they'll actually contract it out to a brewery in another country to brew it. In this case, they actually brought out the brewery. As I said, it's a lager, and it pretty well tastes like a lager. Not that I'm disappointed, but it actually pretty much tastes like most macro breweries beers in North America. It's your typical lager or pilsner. It's nothing special. Like I said, it's not bad, but it's for me it's kind of typical. It's, you know, if you're the most North Americans, you know, we drink our Budweisers, our Coors, our Labatt's, and this is, without knowing for sure, I would say this would be a macro brew in Japan. It's pretty well tastes like a regular macro brew, not a lot off. This was actually recommended by a high school friend, Todd. Like I said, it's not a bad brew by any means, but it's refreshing. I'll give it that much. A little bit kind of boring. It's, like I said, if you're used to your typical macro breweries or macro beers, and you want to try something else, and you don't want to go too far off that, it might be a nice one to try. Like I said, not a bad beer by any means. All right, so my cat just entered the room, so you might hear some meowing again. So while I'm tasting that, I just want to do a quick talk on some other items. Every week I pick a topic, we'll talk a little bit about it. This week I just want to talk really quickly about some adages or sayings that could be linked to beer. The first one is from about 4,000 years ago in Babylonian times. When a couple got married, the bride's father was obligated to give the groom a month's supply of mead, which is honey beer, and thus came the term honeymoon. Honey beer for a month, honeymoon. The next one I have is scot-free. You heard, somebody's doing this, they're getting away with it scot-free. Actually, that term comes from a 13th century England type of area, and basically the government imposed a tax on alehouses, the beer on alehouses, and it was known as the Scot. It's not linked to Scotland whatsoever, it's just a term. So any urbanized or alehouses in urban areas or cultivated land areas, they had to pay this tax as scot-free. So to get around that, excuse me for a second, 13th century, it's not the industrial London or whatever we know today, so to get around it, they actually started putting alehouses in areas of forest areas. Because of that, they didn't have to pay the tax. So that if you drank in one of these bars, it was known that you were drinking Scot ale, and you were drinking scot-free. So there you go. Another one, rule of thumb. I know a couple of years ago, I was on Facebook, they said rule of thumb, it comes from back in the day, a man wasn't allowed to beat his wife with anything wider, a stick, and the stick wasn't allowed to be wider than the thumb. Some research has been done, and they don't think that's actually correct. Now there's different theories how the term rule of thumb came about. It's that one. The other one they were saying it was a measurement by a carpenter. You wanted something it was as thick as your thumb, rule of thumb. But another one theory is that it actually came from the beer industry. What it was before thermometers were available or invented to test the temperature of a wort before you add the yeast, because you got to be at the proper temperature, or you'll actually, if it's too hot, it'll kill the yeast. If it's too cold, it won't be active enough. There was no thermometer around, so what they did, they used their thumb to check the temperature. And they say that's one of the theories of how the term rule of thumb might have came about. My final one, P's and Q's. You heard the thing, watch your P's and Q's. And that was, once again, back in England, ale was ordered in pints and quarts, and basically if people got rowdy, the bartender would yell at them, mind your P's and Q's. So there you go, that's 4 adages that could be linked to beer, and pretty sure 3 of them for sure, and the 4th one is up in the air. Alright, back to this rating for this one, the Sapporo. It's definitely refreshing. It's clean, crisp. But like I said, to me, it tastes like every other macro brew. Not necessarily a bad thing, but there's nothing unique about it. With that being said, I'm going to give it a rating of 3.5. Like I said, it's not a bad beer, but it didn't impress me too much. But I definitely, I'd take another one somebody gave to me. It's a good beer. So there you go, folks. That's my rating for this episode, 3.5 for the Sapporo Premium Beer from Japan, which is now brewed by Sleeman's. Until next beer, enjoy responsibly. Cheers.